Because of the way the universe is created, we each of us live in two worlds at the same time. We have to live in the outer life of our own bodies and the inner life of our own souls.
Hello and welcome to Living the Inner Life. I'm your host, Chris Sheridan, and I want you to join me on a journey of discovery and inquiry into our inner lives, our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, our entire consciousness, and how that relates to and interacts with the outer world. Okay, now maybe you've heard the question asked, should I follow my head or follow my heart? And the answer is yes. Yes to both. But which one wins? Which one has the power? Well, they both do. They're both very powerful. And this often is seen as a conflict within ourselves. We can be divided. Even on movies, you might have an angel on one side showing up saying, oh, be a good boy. And there's the devil over here. It's like, go ahead and do it. We have these urges. We have these parts of ourselves that know better and other ones that want to maybe run amok or do other things. But the head and the heart are two different parts of our being. They speak different languages. They have different needs. And they may interpret things according to the languages that they speak. But when they try to talk with each other, sometimes it's lost in translation, the message that's trying to get through. Okay? Now, the head is generally considered and linked with intellect. That is the logical or perhaps left brain part of our existence, our mind. Things are orderly. Things are thought out. Not a lot of emotion put into them. Okay, very matter of fact. And the heart, being the opposite, but of course we know opposites are very, very linked. They wouldn't exist without each other. So the other side of this equation is the heart. And the heart is linked with emotions, with feelings, with desires, with compassion, with anything you can associate with the heart. Now, physiologically, we have the brain for the head and the physical blood pump for the heart. But we're really talking about the psychic organ, that is how that works in our inner life. So our mental part, our mind part, the intellect, the head, and the heart, our emotions, our feelings. And for them to work together, it's what Carolyn Mace calls congruency, that somehow we have to get these two operating on their own, first of all, functionally, independently, although they're not independent at all, but they each have their own roles to play. So they need to be fulfilling those roles, and they need to be working together. Actually, they're always working together, although if they're not getting along or they're not on the same page, it can seem like they're working against each other, okay? And that does happen. So what we want to get to at some point is this place where they are working both and they are working together. Now, in the ancient Hermetic tradition, this is called the marriage between the sun and the moon, because the sun had long been associated with the father, the masculine, very powerful, but somehow very far away as well. And the moon is more earthbound. It changes. It's connected with the emotions and your feelings. All right? And this Hermetic marriage, this union of opposites, like yin and yang, both work only when they're working together in a harmonious and well-coordinated manner, okay? But a lot of times, that's not what we have going on inside, okay? And usually what happens is you may set out with an idea, a thought, a logical thought. Well, this makes sense. And I could do A, B, and C, and that sounds great. And then you go to set out to do these things, and the heart steps in and says, whoa, wait a minute. I've seen this before. You're going to get hurt. And finds a way to derail the whole operation. Okay, and it works the other way too. Maybe the heart sets out with a feeling. Oh, I want to go and run and play and do all this. And then the mind comes in, the head, and says, oh no, you've got responsibilities. You're a grown up now. You shouldn't run and play like a child. You have to do this. So they kind of cancel each other out a lot of the times. And that's how we can be stuck. I also think this is what's behind a lot of procrastination, or what some people call self-sabotage. I don't know if we're really procrastinating. I think this internal conflict is keeping us from moving forward and accomplishing something or finishing something. Okay? And same when we have anything else going on that seems to be stalled, or we have mixed feelings about something and thereby having mixed results. We can venture off onto a project or an endeavor, and at some point it can get pulled back out. So it's either limited progress, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And there's good reasons on both sides for this. Okay, the intellect has logical and rational thoughts, ideas, and will approach things that way. But that's not enough, okay? Because you can think of something, and think of something that's a little more airy, like in the ether, it's a pie-in-the-sky dream, or it's an ideal, or it's a wishful thinking, okay? A lot of the times, these things don't have that much weight. They don't have that much power. Even if they're great ideas, even if it's the best idea, even if it's amazing, they're not going to be put into action unless they're vitalized with some emotional or passional power behind it, and that's the heart. Okay? So without the heart, these are just ideas, and they're in the air, and they can come and go. And if they want to come to life, if you want to bring these ideas into action, you have to pull them down to earth, and they have to take root. They have to take hold. And that's where the emotions come in. A lot of times the emotion is linked with the element of water. Okay, it can flow, it can move. We're mostly water. The earth is, at least the surface anyway, is mostly covered in water. We can't survive without water. This is part of who we are and how we operate. Okay, so if it's in the air, it can change with the wind. But if it's in the water, it can become something. Okay, it can get catalyzed into definite action. So they can support each other, the head and the heart, and they can also derail each other. Okay, we can use the mind, the intellect, to justify any emotional reaction, even if we know in part of our consciousness that we shouldn't have done something, and maybe emotionally feel that way. But the head can come in and say, yeah, but I was wrong before, or if I didn't do that, this other person would have done this. Find some excuse, some rationalization to justify. Even if it's not right, it will come up with something so we can make sense of it. Because that's one thing about our human being nature. We have to make sense of things. A song has to have an ending. A story has to make sense. Even if it's the most fantastical story, well, within that world, say it's a movie, it has to make sense once it's been established. The story has to make sense. It has to have some kind of a climax or ending. Or we feel incomplete. We feel, if you've walked out of the movie theater that maybe didn't have a good story and didn't follow the rules of storytelling, you can feel empty or confused, or just something's not right. Okay? So we have to have both. But keep in mind, the head isn't all dry intellect. Okay? There are feelings in our minds, in our intellectual part, that has feelings. The head has feelings. And according to our Buddhist friends, the heart has what's called the heart mind. Okay, that feelings, emotions can have intelligence. And like the yin yang symbol, where there's the squiggly white part and the squiggly black part, well, the white part has a black dot in it, and the black part has a white dot in it. So each extreme, these opposites, contain a little piece of their counterpart. And this is where I think we can get the head and the heart to get on board with each other, is if we recognize the feelings of the mind and we recognize the intelligence of the emotions. Okay? And this is something that goes way back. It's one of the most recurring themes in mythology, any ancient wisdom tale, whether it's from scripture or fairy tales, mythology. These are all wisdom stories to help us learn something about ourselves, how to manage the outside world, how to connect with other people, telling us who we are. And that's why myths and mythic storytelling are eternally popular, okay, as long as you follow the rules of mythic storytelling. And it's true in today's movies. Actually, a lot of love stories. Yes, maybe there's a guy and a girl, and it's a rom-com, or some boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy somehow wins girl back over, or whatever gender you want to pick. And these are really representative of the head and the heart. Okay? And you can see it through these characters, that they do contain a little bit of the other one. There's a popular movie from way back, I guess not that far back, but kind of back, called Pretty Woman. You may have seen it, heard about it. You have Edward, this successful businessman who doesn't really make anything. He buys companies and tears them apart and makes money, and all this money is on paper. There's really nothing physical or tangible. Again, it's in this airy sense. Even though he's very successful with it, he's also removed. He's removed from his wives or ex-wives, his family, distant, protected, kind of cold. I'm not saying heartless, but not really touchy-feely, warm and fuzzy, okay? And then you have Vivian, the hooker with a heart of gold type character, who has feelings and she responds emotionally. She reacts this way, very much in her body. And it's about one thing to the next, one block to the next, one day to the next, survival. Doesn't have much of a life plan. And they need each other to become complete. Okay? He needs some of her playfulness and innocence and kind of wonderment in how she looks at the world. And she could use some of his direction, guidance, or having direction and guidance within herself in her life. And we find out that she does have a lot of intelligence. She knows a lot of things that he doesn't know. And he has a side that comes out through her. She helps bring that out. So the heart can bring out the feeling, the kindness of the mind. And the mind can bring out the intelligence that's in the heart and the emotions. Because if the emotions run amok and are just, I'm doing what feels right, I'm going to eat what feels right, I'm going to say whatever I want, I'm going to react, I'm going to do this, all these desires, impulses are indulged, and that can get us in trouble, okay? And the intellect is there, and if it has too much going on, left too much to its own devices, it's going to be cold and calculated and won't have much fun, won't have much feeling. So these have to come together. And like the marriage of the sun and moon, or the characters in a movie that come together, each one bringing out the best in each other, and then you have more of a dynamic situation. They're working together. One sends a signal down, the other one sends a signal back up, and process in a way that the heart can take this direction, has somewhat of a structure to move around and express itself with feeling, okay? And then the mind can have some softness, some gentleness, some openness that otherwise would be in a rigid frame structure. Okay. Now, there's a really great story from mythology about Orpheus and Eurydice. It's also a very, very tragic story, but it's a cautionary tale, and it has everything to do with this subject of the head and the heart. Orpheus was a great musician, a great-looking guy, played better than anybody, had so much heart, played with so much feeling, had a lot of technical expertise. Definitely a good musician, but he was a good player too. He played with feeling. And this is because of his wife, Eurydice, who he was deeply in love with. She was that loving part, that heart that influenced his music. So his head may have developed the technical capacity, but his heart was able to express the beauty and harmony and loving nature of his music that everybody loved. Well, one thing led to another thing, and I'll cut to the chase. Eurydice was pulled down into hell, into the underworld, and he was lost. His music was very technically proficient after that, but it didn't have feeling. And plus, he missed his wife, his beautiful Eurydice. So he goes down to the underworld to rescue her. And there's the three-headed dog, you've probably heard in mythology, the gatekeeper on the way down. Of course, he played beautifully enough to quell and to lull the dog, the watchdog, into submission to where he could continue on. And he gained entrance into the underworld. And he was able to convince Pluto or Hades, I'm not sure which, the ruler of the underworld at the time, to release Eurydice so he could bring her back up to the upper world. And the deal was made, but it was under one condition, that on your way up, okay, she will follow you and she will be with you, but don't look back. Don't look back. Those were the words of warning. And there's a Boston, the band Boston has a song, Don't Look Back. There's a Bob Dylan album, Don't Look Back. This comes up a lot in music. It's part of music mythology. Don't look back. Well, as they were nearing the surface, wouldn't you know, Orpheus couldn't stand it any longer, and he turned around to see his Eurydice get pulled back into the underworld, and he never saw her again. Okay, he looked back. So now he's back on Earth, and he tries to play, and he can't play. Can't play very well. His music sucks. People don't like it. And then he's exiled onto an island, and the native inhabitants of the island, mostly women, attacked him, tortured him, and shredded him to pieces, killed him, because his music sucked. Okay? Technically, it was all there. He could play the scales and all the notes, but there was no heart. There was no feeling. And it destroyed him. It destroyed his music and destroyed his life. Okay? So that's a cautionary tale. We need both. Okay? We need this in science. It can't just be cold, hard data, facts, figures, theories, hypotheses, rules, and laws. There has to be ethics. There has to be morality. There has to be, what are you making this scientific advancement for? Is it for the good of humanity? Or is it for destruction? Or is it just to discover something, just to discover it? What's behind it? All right. So we need this in our inner life. We need to have our hearts informed and intelligent enough to where our emotions and our feelings get channeled properly into a way where they can be best expressed and shared with the world. We need our thoughts to be not only laden with some emotion and feeling, but we need them to come down into the heart. See, the heart pumps blood to every corner of your body. It's right there in the middle where the up and down part and the side to side part, where our arms, it's at this nexus, this intersection. Okay, it's also in the 7 chakras. It's the one in the middle where the 3 below and 3 above, it's where they meet. And it carries it everywhere. So we want these thoughts to be carried into our body, become embodied, become ensouled, to where we can bring them into action. And it's only this combination of the both, this harmony between intelligence and emotion, between the head and the heart, the sun and the moon, yang and yin, that we come together. And then our ideas will take hold, and our feelings will have a way of expressing themselves that's proper to their cause. And because our feelings they can run amok. We can get so far away from what we really want because of unbridled passion or emotion or ambition. Okay? And we can think ourselves into nothingness. That's one of the, I guess, troubles with our modern world. We can get lost in our minds a lot easier now. Our body isn't as required from day-to-day things. A lot of it's computery or things that really use the intellect, and it can really do a number on what we should be doing, and that's, like Orpheus, have the technical skill and have the compassionate feeling and emotion that makes all the great discoveries and all the great ideas worthwhile in our lives. Okay? So think of that in your head and feel on that in your heart and bring them together and ask yourself, am I overthinking this, or am I over-emotionalizing this? We're going to talk a lot more about the head and the heart and this union between yin and yang and the sun and the moon, and live not only the inner and outer lives together, but within our inner life. We want to get that congruent. We want that to be in harmony and bring the best of any technical or intellectual idea that we have, and bring the best of our emotions and our feelings to what it is we have to offer and to share with the world. So thank you for letting me offer and share with you some of my thoughts and some of my feelings about the head and the heart.